March 26, 2001, Panama City, Florida, the final WCW Nitro. This date not only marks the final broadcast of a long-standing wrestling promotion, but it's the beginning of one man's monopoly on the North American wrestling industry. This tight grip of a once outlaw profession saw the rise of WWE's global domination. Across the world, WWE became the pro wrestling industry as much as sports entertainment was WWE. Without anyone left to check a titan, our sports quality would see a massive dip. Gone were the days of rattlesnakes telling you to kiss their ass, and in were invisible supermen who were not allowed to draw a drop of blood or a mumble of a four-letter forbidden word.
How could a company be seen as the lowest common denominator rise again to be atop the wrestling world after one man's ego turned out to be his ultimate downfall? This is a story of families. This is a story of empires. This is a story of kingdoms.
New attitude.
Out of the ashes of poor creative, the industry would get a giant shot in the arm, as Hulk Hogan would go from Vince McMahon's WWF and make the jump of jumps to his competitor, WCW, giving a whole new attitude to this war.
And that's the bottom line, cause Stone Cold said so. Oh, let's get ready to suck it! If you smell what the Rock is cooking.
The Attitude Era was birthed out of necessity for WWE. WCW had just stolen some of their biggest names and started a faction that would define a decade in the NWO. It was an all-hands-on-deck time where everyone needed to be used and needed to be on their A-game. Not only did we see the rise of main eventers like Stone Cold Steve Austin, The Rock, and Mankind, but the mid-card was the richest in the company's history. With engaging stories for all involved from start to finish, WWF Raw was a must-see TV product. From D-Generation X to the hardcore title scene, and an intercontinental title scene that saw the rise of many main eventers of the 2000s.
A few things would be key factors as Vince McMahon defeated Ted Turner. Poor creative, poor management, and a poorly timed corporate merger would soon see Vince McMahon purchase WCW. Once his biggest rival was now under his control. This was the beginning of WWE's worldwide supremacy.
The rise of kingdoms.
October 1999 would arguably be one of the biggest days in company history, even more arguably than the purchase of WCW, because this would be the day that WWF would go public on the stock market. This would be unknown territory for the wrestling industry. A soon outlaw profession was uprooted from its territory system by McMahon in the 80s, and now there would be board members and stockholders to appease, instead of the crowds of yesteryear. And a lot of these investors would be more inclined to care about bottom lines than rock bottoms.
Going on to see performers as disposable, many being wished well on their future endeavors. To appeal to a wider demographic, the company would see itself move into the PG era. Gone were the days of bloody brawls and profanity-laced promos, and in was a product for all ages.
You are a sniveling little suck-up sellout full of suffering succotash, son!
While this era would see the rise of Hall of Famers like John Cena, Randy Orton, and Roman Reigns, critically, it wasn't really seen as the most innovative work for the company. The product became more formulaic and repetitive, and stars weren't really made unless okayed by management.
The fans would get behind a star just to see them get pushed down the card, almost as a punishment for getting over without office approval. It was Vince McMahon's world, and we were all simply living in it. A bonus of this era saw the rise of companies like Ring of Honor and New Japan Pro Wrestling, giving a much needed alternative to the main WWE programming. Here many stars would be formed in the wrestling ranks to later sign with WWE's developmental system, NXT. The great work would continue here, and the developmental brand was seen as almost a completely different company.
It started as a whisper until you screamed it at the top of your lungs. We gained momentum. You made us unstoppable. We are NXT!
We all thought maybe this would be the future of the company. With our indie satisfaction finally being seen on the WWE stage, maybe they would put more indie stylings that people were really pining for in the WWE product. Sadly though, a lot of NXT mainstays and highlighted players would be put onto the main roster and slowly fade away once Vince McMahon was bored of them, dubbed by fans as the 3-week push.
Where there is demand in the market, people will always try to supply, which saw the rise of All Elite Wrestling. Started by many of the indie scene who chose not to sign with the company, the likes of Kenny Omega and the Young Bucks came together to form the first major alternative company to WWE in nearly 20 years. The roster was ensured to be stacked with ex-WWE talent like Cody Rhodes, Jon Moxley, and Chris Jericho. With each company taking shots at each other back and forth on programming, the first real blow wouldn't land in the ratings, but in the roster.
At this point, Cody and AEW were at an impasse. Cody Rhodes wanted to be the guy, and at this point he had put in the work to go out and go for that. He was a major force in the biggest indie wrestling show of all time. He was a mainstay babyface on All Elite Wrestling, and he had made a name for himself outside of just being Dusty Rhodes' son. For him to build his kingdom, he would have to crush an empire. And while he was building his own, one man would fall by his own sword.
Head of the Crown. To tell the story of the last 3 years of WWE is to tell the story of 4 men, all at the top of their industry, 2 of the old guard trying to fend off the new era.
Acknowledge me!
I want you to analyze this situation here, you understand? This is my ring.
That's my title. You ain't got a chance. This is my show. These people, these are all my people because they acknowledge me. I am this show. I run this show, and everybody works for me.
Roman Reigns had been the pick of the litter for WWE for quite some time, holding multiple WWE titles and main eventing many WrestleManias, to the chagrin of fans. Roman wasn't bad in the ring, far from it, but him being forced down fans' throat and put into the same WWE template of star didn't really mix with modern audiences.
Funny enough, in hindsight, a worldwide pandemic turned out to be the best thing for Roman's legacy. Given the unknown nature of COVID-19 at the time, Roman Reigns chose to take a step back from WWE in order to focus on his health. For most of Joe Anoa'i's life, he had battled leukemia. As he sat at home, thinking about his future, he even contemplated retirement. Choosing instead to return with the wise man Paul Heyman, the tribal chief was a character turn that connected with the fans like never before. Roman, along with his family, led WWE into its most successful financial and critical period since the late 90s. The recently returned Cody Rhodes is also back in WWE for family. Cody's father, the American Dream Dusty Rhodes, was one of the most influential wrestlers in the business as a whole. His innovations as a booker and promoter led to wrestling being a more compelling product. While important to the wrestling industry, there is one thing that the Anoa'i family has always had in rotation throughout their lineages that the Rhodes family has never held: the WWE Championship. Cody isn't simply back to be on the biggest stage, he's here to claim the prize that was meant for his family all along. He's back to finish his story.
Then you have the Battle of the Boardroom that would, at some points, get more outrageous than what was happening in the squared circle. Vincent K. McMahon aided in WWE's rise by portraying a misogynistic and egotistical businessman. And as the old adage goes within professional wrestling, your kayfabe life is just you turned up to 11. There are plenty of stories throughout the years of women in WWE being treated well below the modern standard of any human in the workplace. And while there should be a larger discussion on these topics, I don't wish to simply summarize them here in this video, and I'd rather discuss those at a different time where I can give them the time and respect that their stories deserve. This type of behavior within a business usually doesn't come out of nowhere, and it usually starts at the top. And this is where we see the initial incident that would see the fall of Vince McMahon in June of 2022. We're going to be talking about some difficult topics coming up, so if you're sensitive to these types of stories or anything akin to that, I've left some resources in the video description down below, and you're free to click off of this video, and I want to thank you for your support of Extreme League Wrestling. Thank you so much.
WWE founder Vince McMahon has stepped away from wrestling as the board of the company investigates a $3 million payment made to a former employee with whom he allegedly had an affair.
Now McMahon forced to step back from his role as chairman and CEO of World Wrestling Entertainment. His daughter, his interim replacement.
In typical brash McMahon fashion, he's not going quietly.
A bombshell discovery was found by the Wall Street Journal that Vince McMahon had used $19.6 million to pay 4 women over alleged affairs. The illegal part of this being that he might have used WWE funds in order to pay these women off, and being that these women were employees that saw a pay bump during the alleged affairs.
A month later, citing age, Vince McMahon would step down as CEO of WWE. This is where we would see one of the most pivotal players in our story take up the mantle and become the true King of Kings.
You think one match makes someone the best? You think one match makes a man the best? And I still knew without a shadow of a doubt that I am the best at what I do, that I am the greatest professional wrestler alive today.
Paul Levesque, better known to the wrestling world as Triple H, was a many times over WWE champion and main eventer. Outside of the ring, he spearheaded the golden years of NXT, and many thought he would take up the mantle as head of creative once Vince McMahon's time was done. After some time away from the company, during which a health scare would force him to retire, it was now his time to lead the charge for the company's future. As the Tribal Chief and Cody Rhodes told their story, all seemed good as WWE's past was left in the rearview mirror, until the former king would rather see his kingdom burn than gently go into that good night. The TKO of Vince McMahon.
Yeah, Vince wasn't going to go down that easy. In January of 2023, Vince McMahon would strong-arm his way back to the company, using his controlling stake of WWE stock in order to come back and run the company once again, stating that he had to return in order to okay TV's rights negotiations, which were already being done by co-CEO Nick Khan, but you know it's Vince.
Vince would go on to replace 3 people on the board of directors and see to it that his own daughter, WWE co-CEO and wife to Triple H, Stephanie McMahon, was ousted as well. There was no chance in hell he was going to allow anyone to take over WWE unless it directly benefited him. As long as Vince McMahon was a majority stockholder in WWE, it was going to take something pretty major for him to be gone from the company. This would lead to the ending that many had hypothesized, but not many thought would actually happen: the sale of WWE.
You see, merging with the UFC actually made a lot of sense, especially for Vince. His first departure from the company, in his own words, was done under bad legal advice, but with the value of the company growing, he ensured that he would be within the halls of WWE forever, making himself richer in the process.
What he didn't take into account was that he was the seller this time around. He no longer had the power to truly make decisions in the company from a business standpoint, being that Ari Emanuel was the new CEO of TKO Holdings. With a hands-off management approach, it was definitely a much-needed change of pace for the company. Slowly but surely, Vinny's responsibilities in WWE became more ceremonial. Being present during business meetings and making phone calls, this new role was vague to say the least, and a shell of power the man once held. That shell would soon crack, as more skeletons would be cleaned out of the former CEO's closet.
Janelle Grant would follow a lawsuit in January of 2024 against Vince McMahon in regards to a $3 million settlement. The lawsuit was filed due to McMahon being behind on payments to a tune of $500,000. This case noted violent sexual acts by Vince McMahon, assault, and sex trafficking, and also named head of talent relations Johnny Laurinaitis and former UFC and WWE champion Brock Lesnar.
With pressure from sponsors, stakeholders, and general employee unrest, Vince McMahon and John Laurinaitis stepped down from WWE. The following year would see WWE go on the biggest hot streak in nearly 2 decades, selling out 18 straight shows, welcoming in this new era of WWE. To say WWE ever fell off is a bit of a misnomer. While the company had a couple of decades of poor critical reception, it never really fell from its throne as the king of North American wrestling.
As we lead into the new era, led by the grandson of a plumber and the king of kings, WWE's past will always be in the shadows. But how do we tackle the controversy both in and out of the ring for the company? One thing is for sure, is that ignoring it will never make it better, whether it be the treatment of your employees or bad creative. Maybe the Triple H era can aid in these conversations, but one thing is for sure, to positively impact your industry never really costs a dime. Thank you guys so much for your support on this video. It's something a little new for the channel that I've been wanting to try out, and thank you for watching this far. Go ahead and suplex that subscribe button so you don't miss our next video. This has been Extreme League Wrestling, and we'll catch you next time.